whole bunch of other social media things, but the best way to interact with these things is to join Haps, which hopefully there was a link to him wherever you followed this from. And down here in Perivale Wood today, it's coming into autumn, it's been reasonably wet, so that's good conditions for fungus. And I thought we'd have a look at some of the fungi we've got here, starting with one that's not particularly rare but a nice species, Romaria stricta, which is the one that's mentioned in the title of the broadcast. It looks like coral, so it's one of the coral funguses, and rather interesting structure. So we'll turn the camera around, we'll have a look at some of that, and then we'll go for a walk and see what other fungi we can find, and if we find anything else as well. So we're down here at part of the reserve that's rather disturbed ground, rather scrubby rather than woodland, and is developed from land where rubbish was dumped in the Victorian era, and therefore rather a different character to the rest of the wood. But it does seem to always have this fungus here in varying amounts. So we'll start by going and having a look. Hello Georgia, welcome to the broadcast. We're looking at fungi today, and this is the fungus I was talking about on the title of the broadcast. This is a coral fungus. I'm not sure how good the signal is. Let's have a look at this bit up here. Getting moderately poor signal, so I'm not sure how well this is coming across. I'll try and hold still for a minute and hopefully it'll improve. But you can see structurally this looks... Thanks Georgia, that's good to know. And thanks for the award as well, Georgia, it's appreciated. All of the awards I get from these HAPS broadcasts are sort of being saved up and will be going to some of the charities I'm involved with, like the Selborne Society, which runs this wood. But you can see structurally it's quite an interesting fungus with this branching pattern to it. Let's go around this way and see if we can... Let me try this. Just playing with the gimbal a bit to try and get it to behave. Oops, where am I? There I am. Hang on. So just let me look where my camera is. That's where my camera is. Okay. I think I really need to practice a little bit more with using this camera upside down. There we go. There's the fungus. So this is Romaria stricta. There's a small group of the funguses that look like this. And it seems to favour this habitat here. Hi Fiona, welcome to the broadcast as well. And seems to be relatively common around this side. There's a little clump here in the middle of this dense vegetation. This should make the autofocus have a nightmare. But there's another little clump of it there. And they seem to be... It seems to be relatively easy to find. I thought I'd have a look for it. There's a little clump growing up on the tree, actually. I think is that it? Yeah, that is it. Check it out. There's a bit of wood out of the way. But there, I mean, that looks to me very much, you'd mistake that, I suspect, for a bit of the wood. I don't think it's deliberate crypsis on behalf of the fungus. I don't think it's trying to hide itself. But structurally, they are really interesting. It's a fungus. The fruiting body, of course, the fungus will live as mycelium underground. So that's all rather nice. We'll take a wander, we'll see if we can find any other fungus or indeed anything else that's flying around. It's getting a bit late for butterflies and day-flying moths, which are the things I'd often be looking for. But we'll have a bit of a wander. We'll go and check. A couple of weeks ago I did a broadcast looking at some other another oddly structured fungus we get here, the earth stars. So we'll have a wander up and see if they are still out. Yeah, it's remarkably coral-like. It's surprising. It does seem in this site to be confined to this bit of sort of old dump, rubbish dump effectively, which has been recolonised by nature. Fungi seem to have really some fungi seem to have really specialised requirements for what they need. It's not often understood very well. Oh, good. Yes, there's still butterflies around. So Fiona had a red admiral, which is one of the migrant butterflies, although they do seem to breed in Britain now. They seem to be establishing. Not had any butterflies today, Fiona. A couple of moths, a couple of caterpillars, but not much else. Oops. Slightly rough ground I'm walking over. This hasn't got really a proper path on it. Somewhere down here, possibly, I can find the earth star fungus. See if I can do this without falling down, shall I? Best view you've ever seen whilst I'm balancing my way down the slope. Again, you can see here rubbishy land, lots of brick and stoned rubbish, and more recent rubbish as well. I suspect brought in by one of our crows, looking at the peck marks on that. But this area does have these other fungi. Haven't actually checked whether there's any out in fruit today. Oh, there's one. Bit gone over, but again a rather oddly shaped fungus, an earth star. Let me turn the camera over again. Go so we can get on a level with it. And what the central body, and as you hope gets lots of spores that puff out when it gets spreading. Vast numbers of spores, and it forms a sort of star-like array around the outside. We'll have a look from above in a minute. Hello, Frank. Welcome to a broadcast. We're looking at fungi today. This is one of the earth stars. I think this one is going to be Geastrum triplex. It's going to be a push with fungi, me knowing the names, because I don't know many of them. And yeah, as you can see, it produces these vast quantities of spores. And if there was an estimate that if all of those spores were to successfully turn into another fungus, in something like a year, the entire earth would just be covered in these fungi. So as you can tell, most of those spores puffing out there will utterly fail to form into new fungi. But if we have a look at it from above for a second, just get the camera sorted out again. You can see something of that star-like shape that earns it its name of Earth Star. And they're really rather funky. Again, this is the commonest of our Earth stars. There are other rarer ones that occur, and we have found one of the smaller and less common ones here. Although I don't think, we never got it identified at the species level. It's relatively few competent mycologists in the world, certainly in the country. In fact, probably only one or two that are actually employed. Anyway, we'll go for a bit of a wander, see if we can find any more fungus. Yeah, I'm just going to climb up this slope again, so just be a bit wobbly whilst I'm trying to get up here without plummeting. We will go past the coral fungus again, the broadcast referred to on the route I'm taking. So I'll briefly show that again for people as we go past. It's going to work out. Right. Back onto a normal path now. Less risk of tripping over. Can pay attention to the broadcast again. But it's been quite a decent day. It's a nice sunny autumn day. Bit of autumn colour starting to develop. A few interesting birds. Had a couple of red kites flying over. Had a woodcock on one of the sites, which isn't a bird we necessarily see that often because they tend to just sit still. Right. So we'll come back along here. And now I've got to get remember where I was. I think I was there. So yeah, so this was the coral fungus that was the subject of the broadcast. We've already looked at it, so we'll not stop long on this one. Since a couple of people seem to have joined since, we'll come back to it. And that really rather interesting structure, rather atypical from your sort of traditional mushroom shape of fungus. But fungi really is a fascinating kingdom of organisms with such diversity and variety in it, way beyond my ability to understand the sheer number of species and the sheer amount of really interesting taxonomic research going on that is re-evaluating the relationships between different fungi, which means you turn your back for 10 minutes and you come back and all the scientific names have changed and all the identifications have changed, and something you thought was one easy to identify species is now 10 really cryptic species, which is great because we're learning lots of stuff about the world, but it's also quite hard work if you wanted to do fungi seriously. Some kind of ink cap type fungus, I think. Let's see if I can clear a bit of the vegetation here. Just try and clear a bit of vegetation. Oh, I've knocked a couple of them down. There's one that's still growing. Oops. Turn the camera over again. Come on, computer. Where is it? Just give me a second. There's the camera. Okay. So there we see the fungus. Move that bit of vegetation out the way. You see the fungus there. And since a couple of them did fall down, pick one up and we'll have a look at one close up. Oh well, it's fallen apart. We won't. Let me pick one. So that the caps of this fungus seem really loosely attached. Oops, let me just. There you can see the gill structure. It's again be a thing you would look at with fungus. You would look at the stem, the gill structure, the shape of the cap, whether it has any smell. Doesn't seem to in this case. And that would allow someone who knew their fungus, possibly, to be able to say what this is. I think it's one of the ink cap type species that break down into and form into sort of a black inky liquid, because a bit further from them you see these ones, which seem to be the same species to me but much more mature and just turning black and liquidy. So that's another fungus, and I've got no idea what species that is, which is going to be the case. Cool, oranges and purple. Yeah, orange and purple. Yeah, so the colours really blend in well with with the orange fallen leaves. As far as I'm aware, this isn't sort of crypsis, this isn't camouflage, this isn't the fungus trying to hide itself from being eaten. They are fruiting bodies, they need some time to mature and get their seeds dispersed, but they don't last for long as a fruiting body, so they don't need to hide themselves away for months at a time for things that might eat them to do their job of spreading. So I wander a bit further along here. I did see a rather attractive group of fungi along this path earlier, whether I can re-find them now. This is where our boundary stream comes in, and it's rather a wet bit of the site here. The stream slightly flows its way over the path in damp conditions. You can see my boots are designed for this, so that's okay. Ah, there we go. I thought it was somewhere near here. So here's a rather nice, if rather obscured by vegetation, clump of rather yellowish fungus. And if I'm right, I think these go by the vernacular name of Sulphur Tuft. Zoom out. There we go. And they're rather attractive, bright yellow colour. I'll pull one off so we can have a look at its structure. So again, the sort of things you would look at when you're trying to identify fungi, if you're going to, is what the stem's like, whether it's got any structure to it, what the gills are like, and whether it's got gills or pores or some other structure on the underside. The colour, this case it's yellow, so whether it bruises if you damage the skin, that can sort of show something. And the scent, let's smell it again. Again, this one doesn't seem to have a particularly strong scent. Of course, you can't tell on the broadcast. I don't think the HAPS team have quite worked out how to ink caps, Frank, are certainly one of the English names. There are a couple of ink cap species. The one that occurs most commonly around me, I haven't found one today, is called either the shaggy ink cap or the lawyer's wig, because it looks a bit like a lawyer's wig. And that one is quite edible, although, you know, my standard caution with fungi: don't eat fungi unless you are absolutely confident of what they are yourself, and don't eat fungi because somebody on the internet or somebody on HAPS tells you that's a safe fungus. Make sure you're confident. But shaggy ink cap's the commonest of the ink caps. And then there's another one, something like smooth ink cap, which looks rather similar, which is also edible, but contains a chemical in it that's very similar to some of the chemicals they use to treat people with alcoholism. And if you've eaten this and then you drink alcohol, you will probably be violently ill. So safe to eat, but maybe not for a dinner party. I am never confident enough of my fungal identification skills to be willing to pick and harvest and eat most fungi. There's one or two I'm confident enough of that I'd have a go at, but you've got to, in the main, there aren't many in Britain that will kill you, but there are one or two, and there are another group that will make you ill. and mostly the largest group, if you want, will just taste uninteresting or awful. And then there's a small group of ones that are really yummy and tasty. And it's all a bit of a risk, all a bit of a gamble as to which ones, if you don't know what you're doing, you've found. So let me see, where else did I see some interesting fungi? Oops, tripping over. Alright, got pictures of them. So if you've got pictures of them, you could try uploading them to something like iNaturalist or iSpot, and somebody might be able to identify the species for you. It's always useful to, well, I always like to find out what things are that I've found. There are, of course, many other perfectly valid ways to enjoy nature that don't require putting a name on everything. There's some more fungus here. Again, I'm not going to know what this species is. Again, rather orange in colour. Slightly upcurved fruiting body. And you see here some on the side, so you see the structure and you see the gills. But you see here that the gills extend a bit down onto the stem, which again I think would tell you something about the species. Would be a useful thing to do. Rather a nice little clump of these actually gathered around here. See quite a few of them scattered on the floor of the woodland. Don't really know, again, not a species I know, although I have seen it here before, so it's a little bit embarrassing I don't know its name. But there we go. Wander a little bit more towards the centre. So this isn't a big reserve, we're basically going to go all around the site on this broadcast, I suspect. Just trying to pay attention and find some fungi at the same time as you can hear the ring-necked parakeets shouting. They're a non-native species that has been introduced here accidentally. And make a lot of noise. They're canopy nesting birds. They're hole nesting birds. Let's see if I can find anything else. Some wood pigeons flying out. moth. Let's see if this moth settles down. No, it didn't. Well, there was a little micro moth just flew past. Small moth, probably about a centimetre in length. Almost certainly at this time of year, that sort of flight pattern, it would have been hang on. Diurnia lipsiella, I think it is. It's a day flying species. The males flying and the females having vestigial wings and not flying. But it didn't settle anywhere. I could show it to you. There's a little clump of. I think these are rather gone over, these fungi, growing on this dead wood here. But I think these are possibly something genus Mycene, something like that. But a little clump, as far as I can tell, are dead wood feeders, breaking down the dead wood structure and helping. They're cute, yeah. They're rather. I mean, they're rather withered and gone over, these ones, unfortunately. And obviously, provided some food for slugs, but they are rather cute. I'll see if there might be some fresher clumps of this growing somewhere if we can find it. But they are rather an attractive little clumps of fungi that grow. And these, as I said, these are rot species that are breaking up the wood and making sure that the nutrients in the wood are broken down and returned to the ecosystem so that it can be incorporated into new plants and so on. All part of that cycle. Really important stage. Tiny fungi. Yeah, we have a guy who comes here who's I think he's retired now, but he's a serious mycologist. Worked as such, and he spent a bit of time here studying the pin molds that grow on the other fungus, which is sort of serious dedication. But because fungi are so unstudied, particularly when you get to those smaller fungi, I think he found one in this reserve here in northwest London in the United Kingdom that had previously only been recorded from a swamp somewhere in southern America or southern United States. And clearly those places aren't very close to one another. But fungal spores, you can see how tiny they were on that Earth star I was puffing earlier on, are really tiny. They get up into the jet stream, into the high atmosphere, and they could travel a long way around the world, essentially undisturbed. So it's not that surprising that we might have a species here that was previously only recorded in America. Yeah. One of our volunteers seems to have left their bag here. I will make sure they know that before they go. Presume they're still around. You can see here a bit of woodland management. Some of our volunteers have been in today doing this. This is a management method known as coppicing. You cut the trees down essentially at pretty much ground level, and then they sucker back, they regrow from that. So that the trees will regrow from this, and it's well, we do it for conservation reasons. It means you've opened up a bit of the surface to more light. You've got light coming through from the canopy, and you've opened up the ground surface. So that's why we do this. But the reason it was a traditional method is it produces lots of growth of this sort of timber, this sort of wood. There's a woodsman distinction between timber and wood, and timber's the big trunks and wood is this stuff. But anyway, this sort of stuff which is good for fencing, good for structural materials, and it's essentially a way of growing different materials that are useful. This is all hazel, but it also has a lot of conservation benefits as a management practice, so we keep it going. It's one of the tasks that our volunteers seem to really like doing as well. Some of the management tasks in running a nature reserve like this are not that exciting. Hacking back bramble is not a fun job necessarily. But the coppicing work, so there people always seem to like that. People seem to enjoy doing that task. So we make sure we keep some fun tasks in. Another bit of fungus that's in a poor condition. You can see some fungus here. In fact, you can see two fungus here. So the main structure, of course, is the fungus. It's got a mushroom shape, rather warm. But if you look closely at this one, you can see growing on it. This is a different fungus, a pin mold of some kind, growing on the fungus. And our mycologist mate would be interested in that, I suspect. Beyond noting it, that it's a, it's a really interesting thing that you've got one species of fungus using another species of fungus, at least as a surface, possibly drawing some nutrients or some material from out of the other fruiting body. I don't know enough about that to know if that is what's happening. But that's rather interesting. A couple of fungi there as this one starts to go. Frank, yes, okay, Frank's managed to identify his fungus, he says there. So yes, shaggy mane or shaggy ink cap or lawyer's wig, they have so many different names. There's another clump of fungi here. So I think these are clouded agaric. Don't quote me on that. But there's rather nice greyish brown colour with a pale outer. We pull one up so we can have a look at its structure again. So again, structurally, it's a fungus with gills. The gills reach down to where they join the stem, and then the stem relatively smooth, and then it's got the sort of bulbous rooting bit at the bottom. So I think this is clouded agaric, but if anybody is knowing things, or if Frank's looking up the wiki page, he can tell me I'm wrong. But rather nice little clump of them here, growing on the surface of the woodland. And the soil here, if you want, the wood floor is quite a lot of leaf litter, so it's quite soft and friable, quite organically rich material. Lots of nutrients in it, which is probably what the fungi are enjoying breaking down. Oops. There's some more of the same fungus. So it's good to have this stuff. This year at least has been reasonably decent for some of the fungal emergence. We have had some years where stuff really is just not shown up. There's something else eating away at some rotten wood. A bit of fungi. Again, I wouldn't even know where to start identifying this one, but it's rather attractive. Little mushroom of some kind. If we go down here and have a look at one, you might be able to see the gill structure. There we go. All doing their job, eating away, rotting away bits of wood, creating a cycle of nutrients back into the world, back into the woodland, keeping everything alive. rather zigzagging through the wood today. Cutting back on ourselves several times, but that's always worth doing. See if I can find anything else. So there's one more thing we're definitely going to have a look at. Fungal related, and then I'll see if anything else crops up. So what we've got here is this dead limb that fell off this tree here. If we look up we can see where the tree's shed, but there was this dead limb, and as far as I'm aware this stuff here, this is the mycelium. This is the root is the wrong word, but it's a sort of a reasonable metaphor if you want. But this is the bit of the fungi that lives inside doing all of the drawing nutrients, as far as I'm aware, and rotting away at this wood and breaking it down. And because this has fallen down, we're able to see that. And that's doing, again, fungi doing a really good job on both dead wood and within living trees as well, rotting away, breaking down stuff, and as a result of that, creating lots of holes and cavities which are good for a variety of organisms to use. They can, be home for various insects, they can be home for birds, they can be home for bats, of course, which Georgia, who's here in the comments, is a bat expert. So they provide, again, that really useful habitat by rotting down, creating openings, creating gaps, creating spaces within living and dead trees. A lot of noise from the parakeets now. We don't find any fungus to end with. Just heading back towards the end. Yeah, dead trees. I wonder. Yes, dead trees are, as Georgia says, really wonderful habitat for so many things. And I think in this wood we are fortunate because we manage and because we don't have general public access. We're a bit more relaxed. I've said all about being able to leave some of the standing dead wood, but in other places you might have to take down, you might have to worry a little bit about. And that does mean that we've got some some interesting bits of habitat. We have tried to create some artificial ones, so if we look up here, let me zoom in on that a little bit. That is a artificial bat box, a narrow slot on it, so not many birds could get in there, and the idea is bats can use that as somewhere to roost. But as far as I'm aware, none of our bat boxes here have actually had bats in them. We certainly have bats on the reserve, But I think perhaps because we've got enough natural habitat, they haven't really needed to use the artificial ones that we've put in for them. Yeah, it's rather a deluxe one, Georgia. It's a woodcrete mixture. It's some mixture of wood pulp and concrete, so it's fairly robust and doesn't rot. Whereas some of our other bird boxes and bat boxes that are made of wood have things like this happen to them. I think this one was a bird box, so they're fairly robust. Those woodcrete boxes, but not as, but rather pricey. Well, here's a little clump of fungi. We'll end on this fungi. I'm going to head back in just a minute back to our visitor centre there, where I've got a few insect specimens. Yeah, it surprised me that none of our bat boxes have got bats in them. Obviously, we don't actively check the boxes that often. We will go and have a look and see what's in there occasionally. And the rules in Britain mean if we found that bats were using them, I would then be unable to go and check them myself. I would need to have someone with an appropriate license and training for dealing with bats. Bats are pretty heavily protected in British law, which is good. But it does mean that for an amateur, as soon as you've found them, your ability to do any more becomes limited. Anyway, last little group of fungi to look at. Growing here again on a bit of one of our old seats. This thing that it's on was a rough bench for people to sit on, which is now rotting away, and has now got this rather nice fungi growing amongst the ivy. And that, I think, is as good a place as any to end the broadcast on. So I hope people enjoyed that. Bit of a wander around, look at some interesting fungi, identify one or two of them, but mainly just look at and enjoy them. And I will see some of you later.